Breaking news! Tonight we have a special report on the mountain pine beetle, Dendroctonus ponderosae, and its effects on the white bark pine, Pinus albicollis, right here in the western United States. Studies show that the range of the beetle is creeping north and leading to new food sources, including white bark pine. As a result, populations of white bark pine are feeling devastating effects. To get a better grasp on the situation, let's have a talk with our beetle specialist out in the field.
Hi, Kate. I hear you're a specialist on beetles.
I am, and I'm here to talk about the mountain pine beetle today.
So what can you tell me about it?
So, scientifically named Dendroctonus ponderosae, the mountain pine beetle is an insect that inhabits western North America. It has also been called the hills beetle and Rocky Mountain pine beetle.
So, is this beetle occupying its original range, or has the range moved, or...?
The range has actually moved over time. They've moved up in elevation due to warmer climates, and they've started attacking the white bark pine because that's now a food source that they are able to get to. Originally, the weather was always too cold, so with the harsher winters, it would kill off any larvae that were there, that had been planted there, and now they don't. Now they attack the white bark pine.
How can an outbreak be recognized?
There are multiple ways of spotting where outbreaks may be. The mountain pine beetle dominantly attacks trees under stress from overcrowding, injury, disease, and old age. As the beetle population increases, the outbreak will affect many large trees, whether or not they are healthy, especially in dense areas where trees have been closely packed together. Trees that are infected can be determined by popcorn-shaped masses of resin. These are called pitch tubes that occur around areas of tunneling.
So you said that they attack weak, injured, or dying trees. Does this mean they're a problem, or are they actually just helping out?
They can be a problem, but they can also be helping. It's good that they primarily attack older, weakened trees because it'll help start regrowth and help keep the forest healthy. But it's when trees are in dense areas and overcrowding begins that it starts to become a problem, especially when an outbreak becomes too large to control. And we're taking away some of their natural control factors like wildfires and such by controlling those.
It sounds to me like you're trying to say there can always be too much of a good thing.
That is correct. But these beetles play an important role in the life cycle of things here, even if the range has changed over time.
So how can citizens help control the spread of the mountain pine beetle?
Know your wood products and your trees. If you burn wood for a heat source, have campfires at your home, or go camping, just know where you're getting your wood from and where you're planning on going. It's a rule of thumb and also a law in the state of New York that firewood cannot be transported more than 50 miles from the area it was gathered. Infested firewood is a major factor in the spread of mountain pine beetle, and other ways of prevention of spread are to burn effective wood and to take care of your wood plots. A good management plan is key. Make sure your trees aren't being overcrowded and are in a desirable habitat condition. But remember that these beetles are still an important part of nature. As Aldo Leopold would say, to keep every cog in wheel is the first important precaution of intelligent tinkering.
Back to you, Julia.
Thank you for the excellent insight, Katie. Now that we know a little bit more about the mountain pine beetle, let's move on to our expert dendrologist, Ryan Gumbart, to learn more about the white bark pine.
Hello, I'm here with Ryan Gumbart, an expert forester right here in the Rocky Mountain State National Park. What type of trees are the mountain pine beetle affecting right now?
Quite a lot of pine species, including ponderosa, white bark, lodgepole, Scotch, and Jack limber pine.
So the more beetles, the better, right?
Well, not exactly. Recently, large outbreaks of the beetle have led to more trees being killed than usual.
So let's focus in specifically on the white bark pine. What can you tell us about that species?
Well, white bark pine, or Pinus albicollis, is a tree species with a range in the western United States spreading into Canada. White bark pine grows at high elevations, generally about 2,000 to 3,200 meters. This tree favors cold, harsh, moist climates, and its seeds provide important food for grizzly and black bears.
What makes the tree different from other types of pine?
White bark pine is unique in that they rely on mutualistic relationships with Clark's nutcrackers, a species of bird that helps spread tree seeds. The birds can fit up to 150 seeds in their mouths and store them underground. The seeds sustain the birds and their young. However, not all the seeds are retrieved by the birds. This leaves some seeds to germinate and regenerate.
Why is it important that this tree species is conserved?
Well, many reasons. Whitebark pine is a substantial food source for lots of wildlife, including red squirrels, chipmunks, deer mice, and bears. This is because the cone falls with all the seeds in it, making it a convenient way for animals to transport lots of seeds at one time. Pine tends to grow on steep, dry, loose soils. It plays a key role in erosion and watershed protection from sedimentation. From preventing degradation of landscape, this species is important in preventing the soils from eroding and destruction downhill. Thus, the conservation of whitebark pine conserves many species along with it.
I believe that means whitebark pine can be considered an umbrella species. Quite interesting. Thank you so much for your time, Ryan. Back to you, Julie.
Next up, we have a specialist here to talk about global warming and how it is affecting the mountain pine beetle epidemic. How's it going, Melissa?
Hi, John. Welcome to the show. Now, could you explain to us what global warming is?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Global warming is actually a really misleading nomenclature. A better, more accurate term is actually global climate change and is predominantly what's preferred in the scientific community. The 5 main tools for quantifiably measuring climate change in areas affected by D. ponderosae are temperature, precipitation, biomass, solar activity, and chemical properties. Temperature is the main component for measuring climate change. For the beetles, biomass would be the second most important component for measurement. Scientists are able to create models of population dynamics that can provide an educated projection that the insects' numbers will increase with each progressive generation as temperature rises. Now, how global climate change affected D. ponderosae is still being studied, but what research is showing is that populations are geographically shifting to higher latitudes and elevations to stay within desirable biomes.
What have been the measurable effects of climate change?
Well, according to Thomas Stalker, a professor of climate change at the University of Bern in Switzerland, over the course of the 21st century, there has been a 7 or more degree Celsius increase in temperature in the higher latitudes of the northern hemisphere, which, of course, the areas we're targeting for those beetles. A study published by the American Naturalist states that an increase of 3.4 degrees Celsius in a 44-year time frame in the eastern United States during the winter months, which is predicted to increase the population of the beetles.
Is the beetle a good species to study for climate change cues?
Yeah, they're excellent candidates to study in regards to climate change because they don't dispause or go into a state of dormancy, which means their development is primarily based on temperature and genetics. Many insects respond to climate change by seasonal triggers such as the amount of sunlight and the available food sources, rather than increased temperatures. This also means that the beetle may be throwing off seasonal cues for other insects.
Why is it so important to track the range of the beetle?
The reason why it's so important to track these shifts in the beetle's presence is to monitor how they affect their ecosystems. Their populations tend to explode to catastrophic numbers, called epidemics, which decimate the number of certain tree species such as the whitebark pine. Being able to track and predict climate shifts allows scientists studying these beetles to react accordingly and either prepare to help stave off epidemics or to mitigate the damage associated with them.
Thank you so much for sharing this helpful information with us, John.
Glad to help, Melissa.
After reviewing all the information presented in today's broadcast, it is obvious that there is a real issue here. The mountain pine beetle is causing massive amounts of damage in places where it is exceeding its natural range. As previously discussed, a lot of this spread is due to climate change and its warming effect. This devastation needs to be contained. Obviously, we have no way to reduce the Earth's temperature, so what can we do? At this point, the best thing to do is stop any man-caused spread of the mountain pine beetle. All we have now is prevention. Like any species, it is important that it continues to exist. Each species has an impact on the ecosystem that we may not realize until it's gone. This has been your weekly edition of Wildlife Tonight. Thank you and have a good night.